Supokaya Meboa, Anarakta Meboa, Sar Siri Memprayatsa Sar Karma Sutsame, Sitim Chirum Guru, Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan, Sar Tathagata Vajramame Mutta Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sapa Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Dino Meboa Sutukaya Meboa Supukaya Meboa Anaraktum Meboa Sar Siri Memprayatsa Sar Karma Sutsame Sitam Shirum Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sar Tathagata Vajramame Mutta Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sapa Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Dino Meboa Sutukaya Meboa Supukaya Meboa Anaraktum Meboa Sar Siri Memprayatsa Sar Karma Sutsame Sitam Chirum Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sar Tathagata Vajramame Mutta Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sapa Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Dino Meboa Sutukaya Meboa Supukaya Meboa Anaraktam Meboa Sar Siri Memprayatsa Sar Karma Sutsame Sitam Chirum Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sar Tathagata Vajramame Mutta Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sapa Ahum Pe. Om Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Vajrasattva Dino Patita Dino Meboa Sutukaya Meboa Supukaya Meboa Anaraktam Meboa Sar Siri Memprayatsa Sar Karma Sutsame Sitam Chirum Guru Ha 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 Ho Bhagawan Sar Tathagata Vajramame Mutta Vajrabhava Mahasamaya Sapa Ahum Pe.
Okay, so this afternoon I thought I would talk about the fourth of the immeasurables, equanimity, and probably continue tomorrow morning because there's a lot to say about that. And it looks like there's still some questions left out. So I'll leave some time at the end for that. Try to get those answered.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness as its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of vice, attachment, and anger.
Now take a few minutes to let those words settle in your mind and become your motivation for being here at this session, to learn ways that you can be more helpful to others, help them have more happiness and less suffering, and help them on the spiritual path towards enlightenment. So I made some slides. Did you get the slides? Yeah. Okay, good. So the fourth, the immeasurable thoughts is equanimity. In Sanskrit, it's upekkha. And the line in the prayer that we usually say says, "May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies." So the term equanimity is a little complex because it's used differently in Buddhism. There are different meanings to it. But in this context of the four immeasurables, then the meaning is, I kind of invented this. It's more of a description rather than a definition, but it's equanimity is an even-minded attitude that regards all beings as equally deserving of our respect and concern, our love and compassion. So sometimes it's explained as just an even mind towards others, a balanced mind towards others. And it doesn't mention those other things like everyone deserving our respect, concern, love, and compassion. That the reason I added that is because apparently people sometimes get the wrong idea about equanimity, and they think that it means being indifferent, like just not caring about anybody. So it can sound like that. So some teachers really make a point of explaining that no, it isn't indifference. And later we will look at the difference between equanimity and indifference. Because when we cultivate these four immeasurable thoughts, we want to have love and compassion, very warm and caring feelings towards everybody. And the point with equanimity is we want those feelings to be equal for everybody. And that isn't our normal way of being. Normally we don't have equal concern and care for others. So equanimity, we meditate on equanimity, cultivating equanimity in order that these positive feelings that we're cultivating can be extended to everyone equally, without bias, without discrimination, without favoritism. So it's not easy, as you can imagine, but it is important. Like in those following the Bodhisattva path, wanting to become a Buddha, this is, essential that they don't leave anybody out. They don't reject anybody from their love and their compassion and their concern. And of course, a Buddha has that kind of even-mindedness. So we have to start working on that. And in fact, if we did leave anybody out of our love, our compassion, as we are practicing, we wouldn't reach enlightenment. You can't become enlightened if you're still feeling negative towards somebody, uncaring towards somebody. So it's like essential for the attainment of enlightenment that we include everybody. It's like all inclusive of all living beings. And in the Lamrim, the stages of the path to enlightenment, equanimity is explained as the first step in one of the methods for cultivating bodhicitta. It's called the sevenfold cause and effect method for developing bodhicitta. And it starts with equanimity, and then you think about how all beings have been your mother, and how they've been kind, and then you want to repay their kindness, and then you generate love and compassion and take on this vast responsibility of helping all of them, and then that culminates in bodhicitta. So they say you have to start with equanimity in the same way that if you want to build something, a building, a house, or whatever on a piece of land, the first thing you need to do is level the land. You have to get, I don't know what those kind of machines are called, you probably know, but, earth movers. We had a lot of them out here. But, flattening the land, making it, even rather than bumpy and uneven. Because if you try to build something on an uneven piece of land, it's not going to work. So in the same way, what we're trying to cultivate is love and compassion and, this wish to benefit all living beings. So they say it needs a foundation of equanimity. Otherwise, it won't work. Those states of mind we're trying to cultivate, especially bodhicitta, won't work. But it's also not easy. So something we need to work on, and we'll look at how we can work on it. And in this prayer, like this line from the prayer that we've been reciting, it talks about wishing all sentient beings to have equanimity. Like may everybody have equanimity and be free of attachment to some and aversion to others. So that's really a wonderful thought to have. If we think about all the problems that happen because of a lack of equanimity, having attachment to some, aversion, even hatred towards others leads to so many problems, conflicts and violence, war, racism, other kinds of discrimination, injustice. So looking at how sentient beings behave with each other, we can really see, a lot of attachment and a lot of aversion and anger, and all the suffering and the problems created by those. So to think, wouldn't it be great if everyone could be free of those attitudes of attachment and aversion and have equal concern for everybody. But realistically, we have to start with ourselves. We have to, develop equanimity in our own mind. If we don't have it, we can't help others to have it. So, we can have this wish for everyone else to have equanimity, but we need to work on it in ourselves. And then the next point says, it ensures that our loving kindness, compassion, and joy can be extended to everyone without exception. So in this particular prayer, equanimity comes last after the other three. So cultivating love and compassion and joy. But without equanimity, then those qualities, those states of mind won't extend to everybody, that will leave some people out. We'll have the thought, yes, I want all sentient beings to be happy, except that one, and that one, and that one. And likewise, I wish all sentient beings to be free of suffering, except that one. Oh, they've caused so much suffering for others. They don't deserve to be free of suffering. So this is what can happen in our mind if we don't have equanimity. So we do have to learn how to, overcome prejudice, bias, discrimination in our attitudes so that we can, be concerned for everyone. And then it mentions here the enemies. So the far enemy of equanimity, in one text it simply mentions attachment, but it also includes hatred. So attachment and hatred are the main enemies, the far enemies of equanimity. Those are the things that prevent us from having it. And and then the near enemy is indifference. So regarding the difference between indifference and equanimity, I heard a talk by Alan Wallace, who is a contemporary teacher and often teaches courses on these four immeasurables and wrote a book about them as well. And in this talk he said that people sometimes think of equanimity as the same as indifference, being cold and unfeeling, but this is not the case. Our mind should have strong love and compassion, and then we work on extending those feelings to everyone, seeing every living being as deserving of those feelings. So it's not at all indifference, which is like, I don't care. We do care, but we want to care about everyone without exception. And I also came across an interview with Thupten Jinpa, who again was involved in the development of the compassion training program at Stanford. And in that interview, he said that in that program they have at Stanford, he consciously avoided overemphasizing the equanimity step, because sometimes people take the wrong message out of this and think that compassion and equanimity from a Buddhist perspective means that we shouldn't be favoring our own children, that we shouldn't love them more than a stranger's kids. I don't think that's the correct interpretation. Instead, the message is that you should train your mind and heart to a point where you would be able to love the stranger's kids as much as you love your own. Yeah, so the love that we have for our children and, other people we're close to, family, friends, and so on, that love is what we want to extend to everyone without exception. Okay, so the next slide is to look at probably where we usually are, our usual attitudes, which are kind of the opposite to equanimity. So we usually divide people into three groups. It's not something we do deliberately, consciously, but it's just the way our mind works. So in the traditional teachings, they use the terms friends, enemies, and strangers for these three groups. So friends refer to those we like, and that can be family. Anybody we like, anyone we have good feelings for, we care about them, we want to help them, we want to make them happy. So those would be friends. And then the term enemies refers to those we dislike. And when I first started learning Tibetan Buddhism and learning about this topic, the traditional teachings, like the traditional texts and teachings, would talk about somebody who wants to kill you, someone who's trying to kill you, as that's what an enemy is. And I kind of thought, well, I don't have anybody like that in my life, as far as I know. Kind of really extreme examples of enemies. And so on my own, and I'm sure other people do this as well, I sort of retranslated it as someone I dislike, yeah. Someone I have aversion for. That's how I think of enemies. So there's plenty of people like that. Well, not so much anymore, but in the past, I had a very critical mind, and I was always finding fault with people, being judgmental. So yeah, I could easily find lots of people to fit in that category. And then the third category are strangers, and these are those that we neither like nor dislike. So the feelings we have towards them are just kind of neutral. Neither liking nor disliking, neither attachment nor aversion. So just that's where indifference would come in, an uncaring indifference. So I tend to think that the number of people, I mean, this is for each person to check, but the number of people who are friends is probably relatively small. And then the number of people who are enemies is also probably relatively small. But the vast majority of people on this planet and other beings would be in that third category of strangers, yeah? I mean, partly we don't have any contact with them. We don't know them. So, we don't generate either liking or disliking. So these are so our mind, in relation to other people and also other beings, tends to put them into these three different categories. And then we have three different ways of relating to them, feeling about them, and behaving towards them. So yeah, we can be so nice to some people and so nasty to other people, like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And then just completely blah to everyone else. Have you ever noticed that? Oh, not the only one. So then, why? Why are we like this? Mainly habit, I think. And there are causes and conditions. So according to Buddhism, these are the causes and conditions for why we behave this way. So there's a number of habitual tendencies. One is having mistaken notions of ourself and also self-importance. So we talked a little bit about that already, how we have a feeling of an I, a me, myself, somewhere inside that we just kind of blindly believe in and follow, and usually don't question, don't check, investigate. And along with that, we also have feelings like self-importance, like I am the most important person in the world. We would never dare to say that to anybody, I'm sure. But if we check how we behave, how we think, how we act, how we make decisions, then it's kind of coming from that place of, big I, big me. I am more important than everybody else. So, self-importance, it's often referred to as self-cherishing, in the traditional teachings. But the term self-cherishing can become kind of misleading, because it's said that the self-cherishing thought is like our number one, like for the bodhisattvas wanting to follow the bodhisattva path. We have to overcome our self-cherishing thought. That's like a huge obstacle. So it's like regarded as something very negative. But then if you look at the expression self-cherishing, it almost sounds like, so if that's something negative, does that mean I shouldn't care about myself? So it can lead to that idea. And so I'm very happy in the book In Praise of Great Compassion, Volume 5, that talks about cultivating the four immeasurables and bodhicitta and so on. So it's explained in there that it's not right to think that we shouldn't care about ourselves. We should care about ourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is, we shouldn't care about ourselves more than everybody else. So that's the problem, when we feel I am more important than others. My needs, my wishes are more important than others. But we should, care about all living beings equally. And so that's clarified in that book, which is helpful. We have this long-term habit from past lives, from beginningless lives, to believe there's a real I, and then to have attachment. We could say attachment to our I, thinking I am more important than everyone else. And in reality, that I that we're so attached to doesn't exist. It's not even there. It's just like a figment of our imagination. I like to use the example of a mirage. You've probably had that experience of seeing what appears to be water. If you've been in the desert, you can see it in the desert. But you can also see it. I remember growing up as a kid in Sacramento, we'd have really hot days in summer, and if we were outside playing, and if there was like an asphalt road or an asphalt parking lot, the sun is up there shining on that, there would be this appearance of water. It would look like a big water puddle there in the middle of the road or the parking lot. And we'd go up and it would disappear. There's no water there at all. So that's kind of a good analogy to our sense of self, or I. It seems like it's there. It seems like there's a real I somewhere inside of us. But if that was true, then the more we look, the more carefully we investigate, the more clear it should become. It should become more and more clear and obvious that, yes, there is this I. But in fact, when we investigate, and Buddhist teachings explain how to do that, how to investigate this sense of self, then what we find is we can't find it. It disappears. Just like when we investigate what seems to be a big puddle of water in the middle of that parking lot, it disappears. We go right up to it. There's no water there at all. So this is the experience people have in meditation when they follow this this kind of meditation, investigating the self or the I. They discover that it's not there, and that's the meaning of emptiness. That we are empty of that kind of I that seems to be real and independently existing, all on its own. The boss that decides everything in our life and so on, that we don't find it. But until we get to that point, until we get that realization, we're still caught up in that habit of believing in a real I, and also the tendency to feel I am more important than everyone else. So that's the root, that's like the basis for this lack of equanimity and the opposite of equanimity, discriminating people. So So what happens is we feel there's a real I, and I am more important than everybody else. And then when it comes to other people, we see, oh, some people are really nice to me. They treat me the way I want to be treated. They smile at me. They give me things. They make me happy. They are nice people. They're my friends. I like them. Mainly because they're nice to me. They make me feel good. And then there's other people that, they're not very nice to me, and they don't give me what I want. They don't do what I want. They do the opposite to what I want. Maybe they even hurt me, or they annoy me, they irritate me. I don't like them. They're my enemies. So it's, again, about me. Yeah. We have, our perspective on people is very much related to our sense of self. What's good for me, what makes me happy, what makes me annoyed or irritated or unhappy, or doesn't make me happy. They should make me happy, and they're not, so they're an enemy. So that's the main thing. And then everybody else who neither helps nor harms me, they're just, I don't care about them. They're not important. So this is one thing that happens in us. It's something to look at in your experience to see if it's true or not. And then the second point there is attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So those are the three main afflictions they're called the three poisons, or we could say three mental toxins. So we have those in our mind from past lives, from beginningless time. So we're born with them. As soon as we come into this life, we have these in our mind, and they're already starting to operate. That's mommy. Oh, she feeds me. She loves me. I like her. And that's, I don't know who that person is, but I don't like their looks. And cry when they come around. So even as a baby, these things are operating. Attachment, aversion, and then ignorance. Not knowing, not understanding who people are and so on. So we have those seeds of afflictions in our mind, and they get triggered when we interact with others. When we see others, we have interactions with others and so on. So those three poisons get triggered. And then another point, the last one here, is overestimating others' good and bad qualities. So this is another thing that operates in our mind without choice or control. It's sometimes called inappropriate attention. What does Venerable call it? She has another term for it. Inappropriate awareness. Huh? Inappropriate awareness, yeah. Anyway, what it does, its job is exaggerating. Distorted attention, yeah, that's good. So it exaggerates. It does this with people, with anything, any kind of object that we perceive. So when we perceive a person or an object that looks kind of attractive, interesting, then our mind starts exaggerating it, making up stories. Sometimes you can notice this happening. Sometimes it can happen really fast. Oh, if only I had that. Oh, I would be so happy. And so there's exaggeration. So when it comes to objects, people, or objects that we find attractive, we exaggerate their good qualities. We make them into something more wonderful than they really are. Yeah. Have you ever noticed that? You fall in love with somebody and they are like, oh my goodness, they are like your favorite movie star or Prince Charming or whatever is your kind of the story your mind makes up. But then you think, oh, if only I could get close to that person, it would be so wonderful. We would live happily ever after and all that kind of thing. And the same with other objects, clothes or shoes or devices or jewelry, whatever you're into. We find something attractive and our mind just starts, fabricating, adding, exaggerating, projecting. We can even project things that aren't even there, but we want them to be there. We want the object to be like that. And so then this feeds the attachment. This makes the attachment stronger. It's like fuel for our attachment. And then we get to the point where we feel, I have to have it. If I can't have it, I can't live. I will die. I will never be happy. I mean, maybe that's exaggerated, but it does happen. Yeah, people do get to that point. And then with the opposite kind of object, like a person we don't like, we feel some towards them, or an object, any object that we find unattractive or irritating, the mind does the opposite. It exaggerates the negative qualities and projects more negative qualities than are probably there. So it's like our mind kind of creates an image of that person or that object as much more wonderful or much more horrible than they really are. And then we believe it. We tend to just believe whatever our mind tells us. Maybe that's not true for everybody, but it often happens that, oh, my mind says this, my mind thinks this, it must be true. Is that right? Is our mind always right about everything? No. Well, it's good to, take things with a grain of salt, not just blindly believe whatever our mind tells us. And I like to tell this story that you've probably heard it before. If you have, I'm sorry, but it's a really good illustration of this. A woman who came to a course that I was teaching once said that she had been married, and she thought her husband was just like the most wonderful person in the world, like a Greek god. She just like worshipped him, and he knew that she was exaggerating. He could see that she wasn't seeing him in a realistic way, and he tried to tell her, "I'm not really like that." But she didn't want to believe it. She didn't want to listen. She wanted to hang on to her fantasies, her distorted view of him. And then one day the bubble burst, and maybe it didn't happen all at once, but anyway, at some point she saw him in a more realistic way, the way he was. And then she didn't like him anymore. So they divorced. So that must have been very painful for both of them. But that's just an illustration of the problems that can happen if we just blindly follow what our mind says and don't check more realistically. So these are things that happen in our mind. They're like tendencies we have from past lives. They're just the way that an ordinary, unenlightened mind works. So it's not really our fault. We didn't choose to be this way. We were born this way. We inherited these traits, these tendencies from past lives. And the good news is it's possible to rectify this. We can work on this. But it's helpful to know what are the causes and conditions that lead to this tendency to discriminate, so that we can try to pay more attention to it when it's happening. Watching our mind, using mindfulness, using introspective awareness. Just watch the mind and try to notice these things happening, and then we're in a better position to manage it, so that we're not just blindly following whatever our mind is telling us. So then, next slide, we'll look at some ways that we can bring about equanimity in our mind. So in the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, the meditation for cultivating equanimity asks you to bring to mind 3 examples of those 3 types of people. Bring to mind a friend, someone you like, and you could do that now while I'm talking about this and just try it out. even if we're not like doing a formal meditation. But just think of someone you really like, you have good feelings for. And then think of someone, the opposite kind of person, someone you find really annoying, you don't like. And then for the stranger, some people have said they have a hard time finding a stranger because everybody you know, everybody you meet, you always have some kind of feeling for. You either like them or dislike them. So one thing you could do would be to, like, if there's a newspaper, like a photograph in a newspaper, magazine, or online of a person that you never met at all, you don't know anything about them, so you just see their picture there. So that would be an example of a stranger, and try to catch your feeling towards them before you decide you like them or don't like them, because we can still, even looking at a picture of someone, we might like or dislike them. Or what I think is helpful is imagine yourself in a big crowd of people. Like if you're in an airport, one of those big airports, Los Angeles, New York, whatever, there's just thousands of people milling around, going here and there, and most of them are strangers. You don't know any of them. And you're going through the airport trying to find your gate or a coffee or whatever, so you don't really pay a lot of attention to all those people around you and don't have any feelings for them. So you just imagine picking up one of those people and putting them there in your meditation. Total stranger, you don't know at all, you don't know anything about them. You don't have any feelings of liking or disliking. So then, having those three people, you usually imagine those three people in front of you, and then you look at them one by one in your mind, in your meditation, and you ask yourself, why do I feel the way I do? Look at your reasons. We always have reasons for why we either like or dislike or are indifferent to people. So it's good to explore that. What are the reasons that we have? And once you understand your reasons, then you ask yourself, are those good reasons for disliking, liking this person and not liking that person? Are these really good, solid, sound reasons, or are they kind of flimsy? And one thing you'll probably find if you do this is, like I mentioned before, the sense of self. Yeah, we are looking at those people from our own perspective, whether they make me happy, they're pleasing to me, they agree with me, they have the same ideas, same lifestyle as me, or the opposite. They're not nice to me, they irritate me, they have different views, different lifestyle, different whatever. So we'll be able to see the I, the sense of self, the sense of I, the role that plays in discriminating these people. And then, you can ask yourself, is this a good way to relate to other people? Do I feel good about having such attitudes towards others and such a different way of behaving? Right? The way we behave towards others. We can be so warm and friendly to some and so cold and unfriendly and maybe even nasty to others. Does that feel right? Do you feel good about that? Is that something you want to continue? So that's one thing to contemplate, and I imagine either tonight or tomorrow morning, whoever's leading the practice, you could lead a meditation on equanimity, so you can try this out. And then another thing to contemplate is whether these relationships are permanent or not. So we do have the tendency, if you check your mind, you might notice there's this sort of tendency to feel that these relationships are going to last. They're not going to change. The friend, people I like, the person I like, we're always going to have that nice relationship forever. And then the one we dislike, it feels like I'll never be able to like that person. I'll never be able to get along with them. And the stranger will always be a stranger. So this is subtle. It's not something we deliberately, consciously think, but it's just kind of a assumption that we have about our relationships. And so it's good to look at that. Are relationships permanent? And in the teachings, they ask us to, what they actually talk about is past lives, and how in past lives we have been in relationships with these same people, but not always the same kind of relationships. So if you're able to accept the existence of past lives and how we keep meeting the same people again and again, but in different contexts, different relationships, then this is something, can be quite interesting. So the person who's a friend now, in this lifetime, was most probably an enemy at another time. We may have even been on opposite sides of a war, hating each other, trying to kill each other, maybe actually killing each other, or just getting into an argument, maybe competing for something, and just, really hating each other. And likewise, the person who's a friend now, the person who's an enemy now, person we can't get along with, in another life, in other lives, we've been very close. We've had intimate, loving relationships with that person. We've been married, we've been parent and child, we've been friends, siblings, and so on. So the Buddha actually talked about this. That's the next point, that no one is a stranger. The Buddha said that everyone, every being has been our mother and our father and our child, our brother, our sister, and so on. So we've had like every possible kind of relationship with every person, every living being. And it's always changing from one life to another. So if you can accept that and meditate on that, think about that, that can really loosen up the sense of these relationships as they are now, being permanent and fixed and immutable. Going to be like this forever. But even if you have trouble with accepting past lives and how we've had those kind of relationships with others in the past, even in one lifetime, we can see how relationships change. So I'm sure we've all had experiences like that, friends, someone who was a friend at one point in time, and you really loved each other, cared about each other, almost inseparable. And then something goes wrong. Maybe the other person does something or you do something, and you become enemies. Something that can happen just overnight, just like that. Especially when we're kids. You have your best friend, and then your best friend gets to be friends with somebody else, and then suddenly they're not your best friend anymore, and they may even be really nasty to you, right? So that can happen just in one lifetime. A friend can become an enemy. And it can also happen that an enemy can become a friend. Have you ever had that experience? Someone you didn't get along with, and you were like this, or scared of them, and then something changes, and you have a good relationship. So think of real-life examples of that, just to illustrate this point that, relationships aren't permanent. They're not carved in stone. They depend on many factors, many causes and conditions, and those can change. Things can change. So relationships are impermanent, not permanent. And then with the stranger, that could go either way. That person could become a friend or an enemy, depending on circumstances. Yeah, so I like to think of like walking through that airport and then I drop something. Yeah, I drop my bag, my wallet, something important, and I don't even know it. And this person sees it, picks it up, and comes running after me and gives it to me. So suddenly that person becomes a friend. They go from a stranger to a friend, just like that. Yeah. So, yeah, if we think about many of our friends, they weren't always friends. They started off as strangers, people we didn't know at all. And then we somehow have some interaction, we start talking, we get to know each other, and shortly we're friends. So yeah, with a stranger that could go either way, although it's helpful to think of them as becoming friends rather than enemies. That's what we want to do. But anyway, the point is to recognize that relationships are not permanent, not carved in stone. That will loosen up our feelings, our attitudes towards others, and open up our mind to the possibility that those relationships can change. And then another point is, it says here, is anyone a friend, enemy, or stranger from their own side, independent of our mind? So these are like labels, terms, designations that our mind makes on people. We kind of label this person as a friend, this person is an enemy. I mean, we may not use those exact terms, but whatever terms we have, these are projected by our mind onto people. And if we ask ourselves, do they exist that way from their side? Yeah, if someone was a real friend, a wonderful, fantastic person from their own side, if that is their real nature, then everyone would see them as a friend. They would be a friend to everybody. Is that the case? Yeah? No? Robin?
Question about that?
Yeah.
It is mentioned sometimes we have karmic friends, or we have a karmic connection with somebody.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, karmic connection.
Is that maybe somebody who's a friend?
Not necessarily.
Not inherently. Okay. It could be your murderer.
Yeah.
But
yeah, so, yeah. I mean, yeah, that term, I think it means that we have some karma with that person. I mean, we have karma with everybody, in fact. We've all known each other, interacted with each other in past lives, but maybe in some cases there's a stronger connection, and that could be in a positive sense, like, we were really close in another life and we get really close in this life. You meet people sometimes, just almost immediately, you're friends with them. You're just so comfortable with each other, and it's almost like you're meeting again after a long absence. Yeah, so that's probably due to karmic connection. But it also happens the other way. You meet someone and it's instantly, you're afraid of them, you have aversion for them, you just want to stay far away from them. And maybe they feel the same way towards you. So that's also a karmic connection, but on the negative side. Yeah. This reminds me of a story. I read it in a book. It was by a Zen teacher, American Zen teacher. I can't remember the name. But he said there was a student of his, a woman, who was a meditator. And so she was practicing meditation. And at her workplace, she had a really hard time with another worker, a colleague, a man. They just couldn't get along at all. They were always like this. And it was you can imagine, very difficult for her. And one day during her meditation, she remembered, well, it just came up in her mind, a past life memory that was sometime in like the Middle Ages, medieval times, and she saw herself as a mother who had this little baby in a, baby bed or whatever, and it seems that the baby was blind and deaf, and she took a pillow and pushed the pillow down on top of the baby's face to suffocate it. Probably, like, just it's too difficult to raise such a child or whatever, I don't know. But as she was remembering this, she said she could feel the anger of the baby, baby's protesting, why are you doing this to me? And she realized that was the colleague. That man was the colleague, or sorry, that baby was the colleague at work. And I think she remembered some other lives as well. There was another life which took place during the Inquisitions, the religious Inquisitions in Spain and Italy and so on. And this time it was the opposite. She was one of the victims, one of the, what's the term? Heretics, being burned at the stake. And he was the one doing that. And so that helped her understand why they have so much trouble. And she thought, so it helped her, that helped her mind. And she thought of talking to him about this, but she thought, he'll probably think I'm crazy. Anyway, she invited him to coffee one day, and he came, and she told him about these memories that she had. And surprisingly, he didn't think she was crazy. He just, yeah. He accepted it, and then they talked, and they worked things out, and they didn't have that problem anymore. So by remembering that. So, yeah, that's kind of an illustration of how, there can be a karmic connection on the negative side. So, anyway. So where was I? Oh, yeah, so it's because of circumstances, causes, conditions, circumstances, that we see one person as a friend, another person as an enemy, but they don't exist that way from their side, because if they did, everyone else would see them that way, and that's not the point. That's not the case. So if you think of someone you dislike, you can't stand, and then you ask yourself, does everyone feel that way? I mean, there might be a lot of people who agree with you, but there's certainly people who love that person, who think that person is wonderful, fantastic. For example, their mother. Mothers always love their children, no matter what they do. So even a murderer, the mother still loves that person. So there's always some people who don't see that person as an enemy and who love that person. And vice versa. The person we think is so wonderful, so fantastic, there are people who can't stand that person. Yeah? Who, for them, that person is an enemy. And there's another story I like to tell. I led a meditation on equanimity in one course, and then after the meditation we discussed it. And one woman said that when she was asked to think of those three people, friend, enemy, stranger, she put her husband in all three places. And I thought, wow, she is really clever. She's really, aware of her mind, because it's true, right? That's the same person, depending on our mood, what's going on in our mind and other factors, the same person. We sometimes love them so much, we're so delighted for their existence. And at other times we can be so angry at them, we'd like to wring their neck, right? That can happen. And other times there's indifference. When you're really busy, you're caught up in what you're doing and you don't have time for anybody else, and that person might be around, but there's just a kind of indifference. So that's something to contemplate. I find that one really, really helpful, just to realize that, nobody is a friend or an enemy or a stranger from their own side. It mainly depends on our mind. what is going on in our mind, how our mind is working and perceiving and feeling towards the person. So that really helps to kind of pull the rug out from under our tendency to have strong attachment, strong aversion to others. And then, the last point is that every being is the same in wanting to be happy and to not suffer. So contemplating that is really helpful as well. Seeing those other people as human beings, especially the enemy, the one we can't stand, to say, this is another human being like me. And, they're just trying to be happy, they're just trying to, live their life in whatever way they deem best, and trying to find happiness, trying to avoid suffering. And then other Buddhist ideas that are helpful here are that everyone has good qualities. There's nobody who is 100% bad. Everyone has good qualities, and sometimes they're just kind of weak or buried, but they are there. They do exist. And then whatever negative qualities they have that we don't like, those are impermanent. They're not like an inherent, permanent part of them, but they can change and grow out of them. And then how they are just an ordinary being like us, stuck in samsara, cyclic existence, having delusions, afflictions, karma, going through that cycle of dying and being reborn again and again and again. But they have the potential to become free and to become enlightened. So contemplating those points with regard to these three people is really helpful to have more equanimity. So there's more to say about equanimity, but I will leave that for tomorrow because I did want to leave some time for questions. And there were actually a couple of questions already. Yesterday, Jason asked a question kind of about, like, if there's a person who has difficulty finding food and feeding their family, and then they catch fish, is it appropriate to feel happy about that? Because I use the example of hunting, and I said if somebody, kills a deer, and they're happy that they killed a deer, but it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be happy about that. And when I gave that example, I was thinking of someone who just hunts for fun, for sport, not because they really need. And I was wondering, I don't know if any of you know, like in this country, the hunters, people who go hunting, do you think the majority really need the food? Or are they doing it for sport, for pleasure, for fun? Anyone know? Writer?
I don't know. Having grown up in Wyoming and now living in Montana for about 15 years, there are a lot of families who rely on big game, and they stock those freezers, and they feed their family for an entire year on that one animal.
Yeah.
They butcher it with consideration, they kill it as efficiently as possible, and they nourish their family. They rely on it. So it's really shifted my black or white outlook on it.
Yeah, and also around the world, many people live in places where if they didn't eat animals or fish or insects even, they would have a hard time surviving. So, when I first became a Buddhist, I was kind of a zealous vegetarian, and I thought everybody should be a vegetarian. Nobody should eat meat. And I wondered, why didn't the Buddha make a rule about that and, ask all his followers to have a vegetarian diet? But then later I realized, well, that would have made it hard for a lot of people to be a Buddhist. If you had to be a vegetarian to be a Buddhist, people in Tibet, that was a very harsh climate. Is a very harsh climate, high altitude, extreme cold, difficulty growing other things. So most Tibetans are meat eaters. And I heard of places in Thailand where it's like in the hills and the forest, it's very difficult to grow things. And the people are very poor, so they catch fish and they even eat insects. I think Buddha was acting out of compassion, but not making that a rule. So I was thinking about this situation. If I knew a family like that, and the father killed an elk or caught some fish and is feeding the family, what I would do is I would feel happy that the family has food, but not happy that the animal had to be killed. Yeah, so I would feel compassion for the animal that was killed, and also compassion for the family, and also that they are in that situation where they need to kill. They need to. It is negative karma, even if it's done out of need, it's still something negative, creating negative karma. So, yeah, that's how I would do it, how I would think. So you kind of separate out the different aspects of that situation, and you can feel happy about some, but not so happy about others. And then there was a question that came in online that said, yesterday you mentioned that the principal cause for a human birth is ethical conduct. Won't it then be impossible for an animal to take human birth? No, not impossible, because I think it's very, very difficult for an animal to create virtue, because they don't really understand virtue. Although I was thinking about animals that save people's lives or save the lives of other animals. I wonder if that is a virtuous action. But anyway, I don't know. But they do say it's hard for animals to practice ethics and to create good karma. But they weren't always animals. So beings who are now in the form of animals were in previous lives human beings. And when they were human beings, they had the ability to create positive karma, to live ethically and create virtue. And one of the characteristics of karma is that it stays on our mind. When our mind goes from one life to the next, the karmic seeds remain on our mind. They don't kind of fall off, get lost somewhere, but they go with us from one life to the next. And so an animal would have good karmic seeds, virtuous karma in their mind stream, and then when they come to the end of their life, it's possible that one of those good karmic seeds will ripen and they'll be born as a human being. And that's why, our teachers advise us, if we have pets, it's good to try to expose them to Dharma as much as we can, have them hear mantras, take them around stupas, even teachings. You can bring them to teachings or play teachings at home so they hear the Dharma. So that does leave some imprints on their mind that make it more likely for them to have a fortunate rebirth in their next life. There's this one story in the sutras. One of the Indian masters, Vasubandhu, he lived in a little hut, and there was a pigeon living in the roof of his hut. And he had memorized a lot of the sutras, and he would recite them from memory to keep up his memory of them. So he'd recite them out loud, and this pigeon would be hearing all those scriptures being recited. And then when the pigeon died, it was born in the nearby village as a human being. And then when the child, was a little boy, became a disciple of Vasubandhu. And this little boy was particularly good at learning those scriptures that he'd heard in his previous life as a pigeon. So that shows, it is possible to go from an animal to a human, and we can help with that, by connecting them with the Dharma. Because even if, like, the pigeon didn't understand what the words were about, but it's still left imprints on their mind, on its mind, that did ripen in a later life. Okay, let's see if I can deal with a few more of these. Okay, one says, why is a long life seen as more desirable? To me, this seems like either aversion to death or attachment to life. So it's kind of a long question, but so yes, it's not healthy to have aversion to death or attachment to life. These are just experiences we have as we go through samsara. But one of the teachings is about the preciousness of a human life, not any human life, but a human life with certain conditions that enable us to learn the Dharma and practice the Dharma. So being healthy, having an intelligent mind, a brain that works, having access to teachers and teachings, and having the wish to learn them and practice them. So there's a number of different characteristics that make a precious human life. So we probably have that kind of life now, but it's said to be very rare. It's actually very rare. Buddha himself said this. He gave an analogy. He was talking with his disciples, and he said, imagine the whole world is covered by an ocean, like one huge ocean. And at the bottom of the ocean is a turtle or tortoise, and it's blind. And once every 100 years, it has the chance to come up to the surface and stick its head above the water, and then it goes down again. And on the surface of the ocean is this golden yolk, and it's always moving around, never in the same place. So what are the chances that when this turtle sticks its head above the water, it will stick its head through that golden yolk? So the disciple said, not very likely. And the Buddha said, just in the same way, it's very rare, very unlikely to get a human life with all these conditions to learn the Dharma, practice the Dharma. So now that you have such a life, don't waste it, make good use of it. So that's one of the meditations right at the beginning of the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, just to realize we have a really precious opportunity now and we want to make use of it. And we want to live long. We want to have this life as long as we can so that we can continue practicing Dharma, familiarizing ourselves with the Dharma, creating virtue, purifying non-virtue, because we just don't know when we're going to die, and we don't know where we're going to go after we die. It's not definite that we will have another life like we have now. So that's the reason for wanting to have a long life. And also, if we do use our life to practice the Dharma, there's a greater chance that we will be able to create the causes for another fortunate rebirth in the next life. If our life is very short, we don't have that much time, then, and especially the early part of our life, we probably didn't create so much virtue. We created more non-virtue. So that non-virtue is still there. And so then there's a chance that one of those karmas will pop up and throw us into an unfortunate rebirth. So I hope that answers the question. But it's up to you. If you don't want to have a long life, you don't have to. But from the Buddhist point of view, it's considered advantageous. It is considered positive. And also helping others. If we have a long life, we have more time to help others. Okay, maybe this is an easy one. I heard that the Buddha never wrote down his teachings. They were all oral. Is that true? Yes. Yeah, at the time of... apparently, I don't know much about history, but I think writing wasn't that common at that time. And what was common was oral teachings. So even before Buddha, religious and spiritual teachers would teach verbally, and the students would listen. And that's one reason why it's so important to have a living teacher, because that was the only way, at that time anyway, the only way that you could get teachings. There weren't books that you could get with teachings. So you had to have a teacher who was going to teach you directly, verbally, orally. So yeah, the teachings of the Buddha were not written down until about 3 centuries later. And I think so after the Buddha passed away, his disciples, some of his disciples had attained the state of an arhat. They were arhats. And that means their mind is free of all defilements and afflictions and incredible powers of mind. And so they were able to memorize, sometimes just by hearing a teaching, they would know it by heart. And so after the Buddha passed away, his disciples, who were arhats and had this total recall, got together and recited the teachings. And they established, these are the teachings of the Buddha. And they divided them into different categories. 3, what are called the 3 baskets: the Vinaya, the Sutra, the Abhidharma. Vinaya are those teachings related to like monastic life or precepts and so on. And then Sutra are mainly the teachings on how to cultivate concentration. And then Abhidharma are the teachings on how to cultivate wisdom. So those are what are called the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets. And then later, so for 3 centuries after the Buddha passed away, this is how the teachings were preserved. Those who had memorized them, who knew them by heart, would recite them and teach them to others, and then others would recite them, and so they were passed on in that way. And then I think, if I remember correctly, when they went to Sri Lanka, the teachings went to Sri Lanka, people there thought, we better write this stuff down, otherwise it might get lost. So that's when they were first written down, 3 centuries later. So the question is, so if they weren't written down at the time of the Buddha, do you think it's possible some of what we call the Dharma isn't accurate to what he himself taught? Yeah, it is possible. It's hard to know. Also, if so, why do you think he chose not to write them down? It just wasn't the custom. That wasn't. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of controversy about this kind of thing, and like with Mahayana Sutras, the story is that they sort of appeared later, and so some have doubt that they really were the teachings of the Buddha. So there's a lot of different points of view about the sutras, the teachings, and so on and so forth. But this is a thing for scholars. I'm not a scholar. I'm not that kind of person who really goes into the languages that the sutras were preserved in and so on. So yeah, it's possible that there were some errors, some mistakes, and but yeah, I'm not in a position to really talk about that. The important thing is the essence, the essential teachings of the Buddha, like the Four Noble Truths that explain, that kind of explains where we are and where we want to get to, and then how to get there. So those are the most important things. And there's, lots of people since the time of the Buddha who practice his teachings and achieve the same realizations that he did. So by relying on those teachings, even if they're not 100% perfect and accurate, it's still possible to get the results. And to me, that's the important thing. So we'll stop there. It's time to stop. So we'll have one more session tomorrow. I have more things to say about equanimity, and see if there's any last questions that we can take care of.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Rana Mandalakam Nriyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Vajrasattva, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. In the snowy mountain pure land, you're the source of good and happiness. Powerful Tenzin Gyatso Chenrezi, may you stay until